Hello and welcome to today's Missio Nexus webinar. I'm Heather Pubels, the founder of Leitmotif, a communications consulting firm and Missio Nexus member organization. I'm partnering with Missio Nexus to discover topics and find effective presenters that can address ways mission agencies can improve their marketing and communications efforts. Before we get started with the webinar, I want to let you know that Missio Nexus has a cohort called Communications Director and Staff. If you are involved in marketing or communications with a mission agency, this cohort is for you. It's a great place for you to meet, learn from, and be encouraged by others in your domain. At the end of this webinar, I'll give you instructions on how to find and sign up for that cohort. For today, Sherri Heintz Kerr of Cahoots Communication will be presenting our webinar entitled Brand Refresh, What to Know Before Making Your Mark. Sherri is the president and CEO of Cahoots Communications Inc. Specializing in nonprofit communications and brand management, Cahoots has served hundreds of faith-based nonprofit organizations for over 25 years by providing full integrated marketing and development solutions to build brand equity and funding self-sufficiency. Prior to Cahoots, Sherri was president of Heintz-Barton Inc., one of Colorado's top advertising agencies. You can learn more about Cahoots Communications online at cahootsinc.com. Remember, please put your questions in the chat panel as you think of them. We'll get to as many of them as we can. Sherri, it's great to have you here with us today, and welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate it, the opportunity. Thanks for the introduction, Heather. I appreciate it. And thanks to all of you who are attending today. As Heather said, we talked about this, and we really do want to make sure this is as educational as possible. So as I go through this, if you've got questions, she will share those with me in real time, meaning as we're discussing any of the given topics. So we do encourage you, if there's something that you see that you would like me to expand on, I would be happy to do that as we actually go through the process today. Again, this is a brand refresh. When I say refresh, I don't think there's a time when we're looking at the brand we have for our ministries where we shouldn't always be stewarding it and looking and going, are we being relevant? Are we being able to utilize it well? And so, it's kind of like a living organism. And so we always look at it and really believe that it needs to be managed. And like I said, stewarded. So, what I'm going to go through today are the different things to consider about when should we do something different, should we update it. So refresh is just really a look at something you may find as we go through this that most of your brand is really still spot on for where you are, but if nothing else, this can give you a good overview there. So these are just some things to think about before you change your name or change your brand mark or come up with some new things. Is what is it doing now? What's the value, and what are the different aspects that we should consider. So as Heather said, we've had the absolute privilege and blessing over actually obviously 40 years to be able to steward brands for organizations for profit, but primarily our focus is nonprofit organizations. So I just share this with you is that we are a cause marketing firm, meaning that what we do exclusively is work for nonprofits, but all of our clients are faith-based ministries by choice. That really is who we choose to serve. So everything that we're bringing to you, just know that I'm going to be talking today from the focal point that from ministry's sake, we were given the advantage of kind of seeing those of you who are attending today. So we know we've got a really good broad spectrum of ministries that are represented, from mission organizations to churches and to service-based nonprofit and ministries. So I'm going to I put some samples and examples in here that I think will cover all of those different aspects. But if, as we go through any of these given phases, if there's something that's specific to your type of ministry, again, don't hesitate to shoot Heather a question, and she'll interject and let me know, and we'll be able to answer those right away. So all different kinds of organizations. A special request as well. We reserve all the rights to Cahoots Communications Inc., all these training resources and publications, and we really do ask that no part be reproduced, stored in a retrieval system, or transmitted to any form or by any means, digital or mechanical, electronic, photocopying, recording, or or otherwise without our prior written permission. That's all just to say it's taken about 40 years to be able to glean and pull all this kind of information together. And we would just really graciously appreciate it that if you want to use it or present it some different way, just get a hold of me. Tell me how you're going to use it. And we're pretty gracious about all that too. But I'd appreciate it if you know that we need to steward this carefully. So appreciate that. So I'm going to start this branding with the story. It's probably one of my favorite ones relative to brand, but it was also probably one of the singular most uncomfortable situations professionally that I ever experienced. I'm going to talk in broad stroke because I really want to still keep this somewhat confidential, but we were engaged to come in and freshen the brand for a big missionary organization. And the organization, I will just say, is very conservative and had a very conservative board that I needed to start with. And so, again, we were hired, we came, I showed up, and the meeting place for this first meeting that we were going to start this rebranding process or brand refresh process was in the middle of the country. I was driving through cornfields and going past dairies, and it was a quite rural area. And then all of a sudden I came over a hill and here's this great big church, like out in the middle of nowhere. And that's where this event was happening, or this initial meeting. And so I was meeting with the board for this nonprofit organization. It was a mission agency. And as I came in, we started the process and I started talking about all of the different aspects of a brand. And there was a gentleman in the back who started getting a very uncomfortable look on his face. And he stood up in the middle of the presentation and started walking toward me, which was very unusual because it wasn't something that looked like it was going to be physically participatory. And he came up and he whispered in my ear, "We don't use the B word." Now, you can probably imagine I'm kind of looking and going, oh my goodness, what's the B word? And I was thinking, did I say something inappropriate? And I was searching back and forth. And I said, I'm sorry, what is the B word? And he said, and he whispered again, branding. And I was quite startled by this because we had been hired to actually rebrand the organization. And the president of the organization caught on pretty quickly that there was a member of the board who was not comfortable with using the term branding. And so by the grace of God, I think you've all been there before. You do that quick prayer, oh Lord, what do I say here? And then I remembered, having driven through cornfields and dairies, I asked, do you brand the dairy cows that you, for those of you who have them in the dairies? And the gentleman who said, we don't use the B word, looked at me. And then he said, you can use the B word, because he realized that perhaps there was something more to what the brand meant, and that they themselves use branding in a regular and consistent way too. So I know that that many of you, because I know most of you are actually stewarding the communications and the brand management for your ministries, and have been in the same situation where you're not allowed to use the term marketing, or when you talk about branding, people kind of get a little nervous, like, gosh, that sounds too secular. So what we're really going to go through, I'm going to go through the primary aspects of what a brand is and how to evaluate it, and also how to communicate it so we don't find folks who are feeling put off by it, or thinking that what we're doing is over sensationalizing or over commercializing who we are, but rather we really believe, especially from a professional standpoint, that the brands that we communicate to general audiences, our donor base, to the missionaries that we support, or who are part of who we are, the partners that we work with collaboratively within our ministry, that our brand is important. It's a really important part of the whole message that we're communicating, and making sure that people remember it, that they remember what it stands for, and how they can come alongside, or we can come alongside them, and really do productive ministry is really important. So having your brand stay with people and be recognizable really is an active part of the stewardship of your ministry. So I'm hoping you all haven't had someone say you can't use the B word, but if you've been doing it as long as I have, that's not the first time certainly that I heard it, but that was one of those where you praise God that the trip getting there gave you the inspiration on how to react to it. So we're going to go through 6 different aspects of brand refresh. What do you need to look at? So I'm going to start with the brand nuts and bolts. Then I'm going to go through what a brand name should do, then what a brand mark needs to do. We're going to talk about brand standards and brand management, and then also how do you integrate it all? How does your brand play well with all of the different aspects of communications that you're going to be responsible for that you have to take into consideration? So I'm going to start first with brand nuts and bolts. I always like to kind of give a definition of what a brand is. I know that most of this, I'm preaching to the choir, that most of you are aware of this, but if you're not, I just want to kind of let you know the way we view it is this way, and we use the American Marketing Association's definition that it's a name, a term, design, symbol, or any other feature that identifies one seller's good or service as distinctive or distinct from those of other sellers. Obviously, what we're doing in ministry is we're not trying to sell something. And some of you may be if you've got products and things that actually go along with your ministry. But really, what are we communicating and how are we doing that? But most importantly, do people identify it as ours? So we're going to look at all of the different aspects of what that means and what we can take into consideration to be more memorable to the people and the audiences that we serve. So we always start off with what we call unique selling points. Some of you may have heard the term unique selling propositions, but the USPs, if you will. And whenever we are first engaged with an organization and really trying to go, not take anything, make any assumptions, we always like to come in with really a whole blank slate. One of the first things we always ask them is, what was the core idea behind this organization when it was started? And I will just tell you, it doesn't seem like a big deal, but it is absolutely so telling. Most ministries, I will tell you, the core idea was to share the gospel. And that's pretty common. And that's usually, I will say, without exception, a really core motivation of why it was started. But when it gets right down to it, the real core reason why you're starting something is there's a thought, or at least the belief that there's a group of people, and we'll call it an audience as well, that in some particular fashion, you believe there is a need there, or the founders of your organization believe there was a need to be met. And getting right down to the bottom of it is really, really difficult because it oftentimes is forgotten. And so if you're working with an organization, or if you're even a founder, go back to your roots and see, where did you start? Why did we start it? Where are you now? Because that can also lend itself of going, okay, I can see why we might need to refresh our brand. Now, for ministries and things like that, we're often called in. They've been around for 50 years. They really do need to freshen, for example, a brand name. Like there's a lot of organizations that had different aspects of their name. I'll give you some examples a little later in our presentation here of where they've become inappropriate. Certainly wasn't the intention, but where we want to make sure that we're not offending anybody, that we're serving well. So sometimes the core idea is still absolutely credible, but perhaps the name that we're associating with it needs to be refreshed. Next, we put, what are you really providing? It is also, again, we hear a lot of joy, redemption, hope. But bottom line, really think about what it is that you do every single day. And are you communicating that with your name, with your brand mark? I'm going to say here that this is, I'm dwelling on it because it's so important. This is where we really, really ask folks to really think about whether or not, for example, their name is really relating what it is that they provide. And I'm going to again show you, what is this organization providing? How does that represent itself in the brand? It is very, very common. And this is probably one of the biggest obstacles we find that we need to concentrate on, is there is a lot of organizations now who use initialisms or acronyms. And I will just tell you, if you've been around for a long time and it's like an IBM or an AT&T, God love you, because typically that's not the case. Most of the time, initialisms, which is just, they don't spell a word, which is what an acronym is, really don't mean anything to a new audience at all. It takes a ridiculous amount of impressions and repetition for someone to know what that initialism means. And so I will just tell you that when you're saying, what are you really providing? If your name of your organization is XYZ, what does that tell people you're providing? What kind of promise does that have? So that's like the kind of things when we're looking at what are you really providing, and does your name and your mark and your communications really make that clear? So that's the next thing to look at. And then last, but I've got to tell you, really important, the number of mission statements that we encounter when we're first engaged is mission statements don't get a lot of stewardship. Oftentimes it's sort of like, yes, we know it and all that, but I'll tell you that we find, and we think it's a really great tool. We get asked, what we need, what we really need is we need our elevator speech. We need to have an elevator speech. Well, I will tell you the mission statement is one of the absolute best ways to create your elevator speech, but it also is in a sentence. And we really do encourage organizations and ministries to let's boil this down to a single sentence that everybody on staff can memorize. And when someone says, so what is XYZ? You can have that one sentence mission statement. But we use the mission statement too creatively. And I say this to you because as communications professionals as well, the mission statement for the organization should be your creative filter. When you're thinking about a new opportunity, that next appeal that you're ready to do, perhaps it's your magazine or a publication, or it's some of the social media, does it complement your mission? I will tell you, your mission statement is one of the best things to keep you from getting out into the weeds on kind of a goose chase on running. Should we run that full page ad in Christianity Today? When you go, is it going to be within your mission? So using your mission statement as that creative filter is what we're doing, absolutely hand in glove with the mission we've been called to do. And like I said, it keeps you really honest, and it keeps your communications absolutely spot on. It'll keep you from doing things like golf tournaments, because golf probably might not have anything to do with your ministry, but maybe instead doing an event or a promotion that absolutely complements everything that you do. And I'll give you some examples of that too, because that's branding at its best too. So again, that mission, your mission statement can be your elevator speech. It should be your creative filter. And so when we've looked at all of the unique selling points, I'm going to use 2 slides of this because I know that there was a number of churches that are attending this today too. So I want to make sure and give you some examples of that. How does that translate then just into some of the general imagery and names of organizations? And I put up just a couple of them that we've just been working with here in the last year or two. That our organizations, a lot of these have a long legacy. They've been around for decades and decades, and some over 100 years. And you go, should you change the name? Should you change the mark? What do we need to do? Are they relevant? Now, these are all marks and names and things that have been refreshed. But again, you look at organizations like Colorado Christian Services. Most people, if they just saw what it was and even saw the mark, would have no idea what they do. Well, the truth be known on this, though, the equity of their name is actually quite dynamic. And so to change that name would literally be taking 3 steps backwards. And so then sometimes you can just localize it by putting adoption planning, and then you know exactly what it is. So MUCOP is an organization that's on Christian college campuses that works with students who are missionary kids. And so it essentially shows them all a place where they can find community no matter where they come back to the States to go to school. So again, updating that. But MUCOPA, unless you speak Greek, because that's what it is, it's that kind of organization on campuses, you wouldn't know what a MUCOPA was, right? You wouldn't know that it's MK, which sort of stands for missionary kids. So you've got to give that, again, freshening it. And it's been around for years. Missions Door was an organization that literally had 3 different names that just didn't fit, and they kept outgrowing, and it got too long and needed to be simplified. you're also going to see too, and I know again, most of you are more than aware of this, that we are finding that it really serves organizations well now to be iconic in the brand design, the brand mark design, because that can translate into your social media, your apps, all of that kind of thing. So that's also something that we're really noticing is really advantageous. So again, looking at all these, your typefaces, what is it saying? What do they do? If you look at it and you're not sure, what does this organization do? Those are the kind of things we're going to show you, all of the different aspects of your brand that can feed into it and make sure that when people are introduced to you, they leave with understanding and have an idea of exactly what your ministry is called to do. I also wanted to put some church logos are I will tell you, over the years, we've done many. This is just a few over the last number of years. And I will tell you that I know most of you are from all over the country. We're in Denver. And being in Denver, that means that obviously we can see the Rocky Mountains right out our windows for most. That's how we know where West is. But within our state, we always have to kind of smile and just respectfully not say anything, but the majority of church logos that have the mountains, a sunrise, and a cross is staggering. Well, we're in Colorado and that's what we want to have, instead of going back and going, what is unique about your church, going back to how you founded, what was the reason why you started, what is your church's mission, and then designing and creating and naming your church past that point. So I'm just showing you again the variety of different churches and what is unique about them, and finding a selling point, or that, if you will, that thing that is a hook that sticks with people. I look at Rockland and you go, gosh, that's a gray logo, but Rockland has a cairn that has been out in front of their church. They're up in the mountains. It's a marker that's out in front of their church, and it is shaped like and has the characteristic of a cross, which is very, very unique for this church. And it's a huge part of the legacy and history of the church. It does make them distinguished. Pinyon Hills is in the Southwest. Open Bible is a church denomination and needed to be broad in what it presents. Pathways Church is a very contemporary, I'll use the word hip church. And you can see from a colorization the same thing. Aspen Ridge is literally in the mountains and is surrounded and literally is situated in an aspen grove. And the people in the community know that's where it is too. So same thing with Cherry Hills. That is actually the name of the suburb that the church was started in. Mission Hills was founded literally in a location that's got 3 hills, and you've got the understanding of the Trinity is very important as well.
Hey, Sherri.
Yes.
I have one question. Somebody's asking, do you have a guide to creating a mission statement?
Prayer. Mission statement. I'm going to be completely transparent on this. A good copywriter, a good writer, first and foremost. I say this so respectfully, but typically mission statements are composed and created by a board or the elders, a group of people around a table. That's not the way to create a mission statement. What we need is a good, and for most of you, I'm hoping some of you are good writers. That's why you're in communications. You just need to have a wordsmith, someone who can take all of the things. What do we do? And take, because I've seen mission statements that are 4 paragraphs long. And you go, oh, gracious, that's a laundry list, not a mission statement. So whittling it down. I always say this to be true. I was in Christian radio for years and years. And one of the advantages I really learned there was I'd get these big news releases that I only had a 10-second, I had to do a 10-second PSA for a 2-page news release, and learning how to condense and have, they call it inverted pyramid in journalism. For those of you with a journalism degree, it means have the most important stuff right at the top, down to the things that are least important. And you just keep whittling and whittling until you've got it. But it really, I will tell you, it takes someone who's got good writing skills, who's got good editing skills, and most importantly, has really whittled down what is the core idea? What is it that we are providing? What do we say every day? This is why I came to work today. This is what I'm going to do. And so I will just tell you, it really takes someone who is a good writer, who knows how to edit well, but who also knows how to ask those questions to really, really whittle it down. So a good writer and editor, the opportunity to take and really take inventory of what the organization really is doing. Because by the way, the mission can change. And that happens all the time. And actually, it happens a lot with really healthy ministries, that they outgrow it, or they need to add to it, or God has shifted them slightly. So what is it? What's the core idea? What are we really providing? And what do we know that we have been called to do? So I would say, I know that's broad stroke, but that's probably some of the basics on how to do that, is get somebody who knows how to write and who knows how to edit, and then has access to all of those who really can speak into what's this organization doing. So it takes a good writer. Reporters can do it as well, so they can whittle it down.
Thank you for that, Sherri. I just want to let you know we're about 25 minutes past the hour.
Super. Thanks so much. Okay, so selling points. Now, I know this is a laundry list, and so you can go back and watch this webinar. I know that this will be online, and you guys can access it again. So forgive me, because do as I say, not as I do. I do not recommend that you do a PowerPoint slide that's got small type like this, but I want to share it with you because it has taken years and years to put this list together of what should a brand name do. So many ministries right now are looking to rename. A lot of churches are dropping, for example, their denominations out of their names. A lot of mission organizations were using initialisms, and nobody can retain who they are, or their mission has changed, or it's grown. So what should a good brand name? So you're going, okay, we've got to come up with a new name for this organization. How do we do that? Here's a list. A good name should present a promise or a benefit, communicate purpose, vision, mission, core values, provide for experiential marketing or a common experience. It needs to be relevant to all of your audiences. Often it needs to be geographically inclusive, easy to read, spell, and retain. Less than 5 words. It needs to help distinguish your organization from another, and also differentiate you from competition. I hope I don't offend somebody by saying there's competition, but it means competition for someone's attention. Needs to add value or credibility, be emotional and motivational, be easily localized by program, products, and service names, all those other things that you do. And be available for usage and ownership. Probably should put that at the top. It means you can get the URL, you can actually copyright it or register it, that you can use it and own it, because and I've got some examples in here of organizations who had a name that was literally being used by 50 others, and you go, well, that's probably not going to make you distinctive. So this is quite a laundry list, and I will just tell you, this is what we as professional brand designers, these are the things that we go, does it do this? Can it do that? Okay, so can a brand name do all of these? Probably not. But if you can get a good portion of these covered by what your name is, just know you'll be doing yourself a service, because you'll make yourself more memorable. Let me give you some examples. We were approached by a couple who were in ministry. And they said, we've had this ministry for 25 years. We just can't, it just doesn't seem to stick with people. They don't seem to be able to retain it, and they get confused, and we don't know what to do. And it was called Outreach of Hope. And this is actually their logo. So sorry, it's all pixelated, but it was the best example that they gave us. And they said, what are we going to do? Well, let me just show you what we changed their name to and give you a little history on it. And I think you'll see all of those things that I've just talked about, how that can be exemplified. The couple was Dave and Jan Dravecki. Some of you may know Dave Dravecki was the pitcher for the San Francisco Giants. He got cancer in his left arm, literally had an amputation that started at the left side of his neck all the way down to his hip. I mean, a huge portion of his body was literally amputated to save his life. He and his wife, Jan, were called to Colorado down, and they were actually going to be part of Focus on the Family for a little bit, but actually established their own ministry called Outreach of Hope. The purpose and what they were called to do, their mission, was to help people with cancer go through to the end of their lives, hopefully go into remission, but help people with cancer make it through to endure. And so we renamed them to Endurance. Probably know there's lots of biblical connotations there. And so you can also see as well, there are low points and there are high points when somebody is trying to survive and go through everything that's involved in cancer. So endurance, there's your promise. And it lets people know that we're going to take you on that journey, and we're going to be beside you. And obviously we did, if you will, localize it with Jan and Dave's name because their name has recognition too. Huge difference in the response and how many people, because they all went, oh, you are helping me endure this. So that's one example. Here's another, worldview. This was a client of ours. And if you know what they do, you go, okay, I get it. But as we all know in ministry, we talk about worldview all the time. So it doesn't make it or differentiate it. But what this organization does, and what we rebranded their brand name to, was culture bound. They teach people in ministry and mission how to go into another culture and be able to assimilate quickly. So they teach them how to be able to live and work in another culture. And so it's for those people who are culture bound. And you can see that it's also exemplified in the fact that there's motion from here to there. It could be next door, it could be across the world, but they do deal exclusively in culture for those people who are going out to a new one. So again, worldview, my goodness, there were probably 50 different organizations that had worldview in their name. So it wasn't distinctive. Culture bound was a trademark. It was available for a URL. So all of those different characteristics and abilities and selling points were available. Another one, you guys probably heard of Meals on Wheels. How many Meals on Wheels are there? Well, the organization we worked with here is just local, and TLC, you'd think Tender Loving Care. Well, no, that was actually the Littleton community Meals on Wheels. Who would know that initialism was that? Well, they had to abbreviate it, and then they put a heart on it, and then they made it go, and then they put wheels on it, and then they put a tagline. Again, this organization does so much more than Meals on Wheels. They do all kinds of different senior services and things, but what they really do ultimately, not just in the sense of providing people with food, they provide them with relationship and with company and with care. They nourish them literally to the greatest capacity. So again, simplifying, there's Nourish Meals on Wheels, Nourish Senior Services. It can be localized by all their programs, products, and services. So naming, that's the basic characteristics. What should we be looking at? Does our brand name do these things now? How much equity is built in our brand name? When you get to the next point, or you go, you know what, our name is good, or you know what, we do need to look at renaming, then going into your brand mark or logo, right? We all know what that means too. Here's what a good brand mark needs to do. It needs to work perfectly in black and white. It needs to reduce without losing detail, enlarge without gaining detail. I can tell you a terrible story about how we had one that, when enlarged, the logo looked like a black widow spider. So you learn those things the hard way, which is sad to say, but it also needs to reproduce with integrity, be easy to read, spell, and retain, work in both horizontal and vertical positioning. We say that now because, you get your website and you need a vertical instead of a nice big square logo where it doesn't work anymore. So now we actually create both versions to make sure that it's going to work in all the different mediums that you need it in now. Contain a visual promise or benefit, be contemporary and relevant. Sometimes all that means to be contemporary is that green just needs to be tweaked from olive green. Actually, that's hip again. Pantone now, that was one of the main colors for this year again, which is crazy to see that come back around. But sometimes it can be something as simple as just slightly changing the ink color so that it's contemporary. It needs to be memorable, contain name, logo, and tagline. In other words, all those things, when you put them together, need to work well together. It needs to be unique enough to be trademarked, and it needs to work with all your programs, products, and services. So I'm going to give you some examples. Here's another organization. I'm sure you're looking at this and going, what is this? And this is an organization over 50 years old. People just don't seem to retain us. This was also an organization that had a name that was offensive to some people, even though when it was originally created, it wasn't. So I don't know, you might be looking at it, people could see bunny ears here and all of that. Well, the organization is Navajo Ministries, but it was called Navajo Missions. And the Navajo people found that offensive, that we don't need to be somebody's mission essentially we don't need your help, even though this organization provides um, assistance to Navajo children who've been displaced. And so they've got a group homes, if you will, for Navajo kids. The logo that's on here was as much for the people they serve as well as the people that they communicate to. Every aspect of this mark was produced and designed with the help and support of Navajo artists and communicators. Every piece of it, every symbol on it means something. So the audience on this was not only the children that they serve, but also obviously the audiences within their community. So the name was also changed to ministries because they do more than one thing. They do counseling. They've got grief homes. They've got a petting, a Navajo a farm, if you will. It's amazing, but they do more than that. So it was changed to Navajo Ministries, and again made less offensive than the word mission. Ambleside is a Christian private school that's international. It's got schools all over. I'm going to show you, this is the perfect example of what a refresh looks like, where you take what you've got, the equity that's been built, and then you take it and you make sure that it's contemporary and it reproduces better. So I'm going to show you, here's all the Ambleside schools, and you can see that they were close, but no cigar, so to speak, of everyone trying to keep brand integrity, which is why in a minute we're going to go into brand standards. And I'm just showing you all of these. I know it looks like kind of an explosion on the screen, but this is the best thing to do too. If you're an organization that has a lot of different entities that work within your structure, do we use the brand well? Are they using it correctly? Is it building the brand? So what we've done is we took the original logo, as well as you can see their brand mark. This is a skylark. The original version, you can see this didn't reproduce well. People didn't, it kind of looked like a little schmutz, it wasn't exactly helping them tell their story. So we refreshed the brand. We gave it the movement of the fact that Ambleside launches young lives into a life where they can have a living education. It goes on and on. We made their skylark more iconic, so we could be using it in a number of mediums, as well as also did a highly illustrative form of it because it's really a part of their brand. They've got incredible art education. So it also needed to be localized by all of their different schools. So you can see how we did Ambleside, Colorado, and they chose to have their iconic illustration be a blue spruce, which is the state tree. And then also formalized a member of Ambleside Schools International. Now, I show you this because we've worked with so many mission organizations who have 3,000 missionaries out in the field, and people don't even know that the missionary is part of your organization. This is some of the things where we make sure that you've got the brand tools set up so everybody can show their affiliation or association. So everybody is collectively building the brand, which is certainly to the advantage of everybody involved. I just threw this in. This isn't a ministry, but this is a great example of, you can see their mark. Literally the folks who originally designed the Colorado Railroad Museum logo, we call this a kitchen sink logo. I mean, they put everything in. When were they established? Where are they located? I mean, gracious sake, it's got everything. But when you reduce it down, it loses absolutely every aspect. So redesigning it and giving it something that works in every format, from color to black and white to reversed, as well as could be attached to their URL so that they could use that as a tag, gave it a lot more capacity and made it a lot more memorable. So a brand also has standards. So once you've established and redesigned, you've got the new logo, it's been freshened and things like that, committing that to actually a standards guide, an actual document that people who need to use the brand know how to use it, really should be committed to a guide. And I'm going to go through this fairly quickly because most of you are probably familiar with brand guides. And I'm going to call this a really the bare minimum of what you should have within your brand standards guide. You should be looking at how the logos are used, your color palettes, your fonts, your voice, meaning your copy or your content standards, videos, pictures, promotional items. All of those things should be committed to a document so people know the parameters of your brand. On your logos, for example, making sure people know how to use them in every way, that they understand that they have to keep, certain distance, what the minimum margins are, X height, if you will, so things don't crowd it too much, that they don't distort it, how to use it. Now, I'm using Deaf Bible Society as an example, because obviously avatars are such a huge part of what we do now. Interesting for them, the brand is the actual sign language for the words deaf Bible. So this is iconic, obviously, to the deaf community that they serve, but it's also a great communication tool for their donor base who are primarily hearing. Their colors, we know that you've got to define all of these different colors, and you can see they've got so many services and programs and products. Again, through colorization was one of the ways that they are able to distinguish themselves. Their fonts, making sure that everybody's got their fonts loaded, they know how to use them. How do they use them? What are primary, secondary, tertiary? All of their color palette and how those are translated. And they've got all of them in CMYK and RGB. And I know most of you know how those different formats of color are needed, as well as hex. So that those are all diagrammed out, so that when somebody is using the fuchsia, it is 234C as far as their Pantone, their PMS color, and they know how to build it in a CMYK model or RGB or also hex. So color is huge. And especially when you're having to reproduce it in a PowerPoint or print it out on your copier or have it on your website. Your voice. How do we talk? How do we do addresses? How do we do times? How do we do AM, PM? All of those things sound like they're really nitpicky. Well, they should be, because your brand is important. And so stewarding that and being intentional can make a huge difference with the audiences you serve, because you're so consistent. It looks really professional. It adds credibility like you wouldn't believe. Video formats. What are your intros? What are your outros? Do we have everything branded well, even if it's an old piece of information? Do we make sure that it's understandable? What kind of standards are there? So those are just a few of them. We also believe you should have photo standards. Like, we never have people looking directly in the camera. We always make sure it's candid, so it's capturing life. So your photos are some of those things, your promotional items, your signage, all of those, if you've got the opportunity, should be formalized so that people have the pattern to follow. Your campaigns, your taglines should all be designed so people know how to use them within your organization. And so that then again translates to everything, your collateral materials, your website, your social, all of the different logos that you use and how you use them together. Your advertising. Again, how does that look, in making sure that every aspect of it? How do you do headers? What kind of photos do you use? In our case with Deaf Bible, what kind of hands to use? Same thing with your development, your fundraising tools. How does that look? What is it doing? Who's that audience? How do we make sure that there's not a dilution? But still, if you put everything and laid it all out on a table, it all matches and it's branded well and it's immediately associated with the organization, right down to the different wallpaper and tools. I will tell you, for the deaf, really tough, because every word actually has motion, getting stills. But you can see here too, where you can differentiate through color to be able to give it some perspective as well, right down to your promotional items, down to your display tents and banners and what you use when you go to conferences. All right, so I put me on here. So the fifth thing, brand needs to be managed to make the marketing process whole or complete, and by adding and bringing together all of the communication activities or tools with the goal of providing a unified image and presentation of a program, product, and service. I put my face on here because somebody's got to be the corporate cop, that person who says, you know, that really looks cute, and I appreciate you putting that on canary yellow paper, but that really isn't in our brand standards. And so I have to lovingly tell you that I'm sorry, no, we need to put that on white. Here's how you can use it. This is what you can do. Because what you will find are all of those dear people that we work with every day who have the best intentions and their hearts are absolutely lovely, but they have been misled to believe that if you put something on bright colored paper, it will get more attention. And the truth is, that it couldn't be more incorrect, because when you put something on bright paper that is not in your color palette, what you're doing is literally starting over. You're presenting a brand that no one's seen before. You're taking 5 steps backwards rather than getting the attention. You know, and if it's so bright that when you shut your eyelids, you can still see the type, probably not a good communication tool. But if they follow the standards, let me just tell you this too, because you're going to be stewarding and do every day. Everybody gets tired of the brand. Oh, let's do this. Shall I use the term? I want something that pops. We hear that every day too. To say, you know, you can put something that pops, but probably what you're doing is, again, stepping backwards and not building equity. the repetition that you need to get your brand recognized. You have to be presenting it. It's the good old advertising formula: reach times frequency. How many times has my audience seen that exact logo? So they start going, oh, wait a minute, I've seen that. I will tell you, in the secular advertising field, if you are running commercials in a day, if you aren't running 18 of them, you're making no impression. It's not going to last. That's for a single day of television commercials. Think about what we're trying to do as a ministry. We don't have those kind of budgets to be able to do that. So if we aren't consistent for years in presenting our brand to our audiences, don't kid yourself. You're going to be tired of it. And I always say lovingly, get over it, because your audiences aren't tired of it. They've only seen it twice this year, maybe 6 times. Wouldn't it be great if they'd seen it at least monthly? So remember that it takes years to build that equity. And if you look at this, I'm going to give you another example that you've got to manage it. This is an organization that's got locations all over the world, and they're all doing their own deal. And as you can see here, this is the reason we were hired. How do we pull this all together? Well, the organization's name is Cadence International. And in simplified, here's our mission statement: ministry to the military. There you go. Enough said. Pretty easy. Everybody can define that. But we freshened their corporate brand, but then also help them make materials that all of their different local locations could use, that they could localize. Obviously created a new website so that they could push these things out to the organizations serving the military, but also that the military could come to. And most importantly, and I know this will resonate with a lot of the mission organizations, is all of these missionaries are raising their own support, and they were doing a million different things. The number of different really creative word templated prayer letters and newsletters and things that they were creating were not helping to build that brand, so that when someone in the military was stationed in a new location where they could go and go, oh, good, Cadence is here. That's what we are trying to build. So creating tools, communication tools that the missionaries could use and make sure that their brand was contiguous and really building Cadence to their advantage in that military location, as well as events that they could take on the road and use and help raise funds for their localized ministries as well. Another, creating things that could be localized but still maintain the brand, as well as promotional items, right down to banners, so that you could use these banners anywhere in the world instead of people literally coming up with brand new ones, which cost so much more. And again, no one's got money to burn in ministry. And then, and 6, a brand needs to play well with others. And what I mean by that is truly integrated communications. Look at all of the different things you do, all the activities or tools that are involved in moving all the programs you do, the services you do, and the products from you to the people who need to get to them. We talked about the nuts and bolts, what a name should do, a mark should do. Standards need to happen. You need to manage it, and it needs to all be fully integrated. So that's our webinar today. I'm going to flip to the last slide, but also entertain any questions that you may have. And I can go back to different slides or what have you. So if anybody's got questions, I'd love to entertain those now.
Thank you, Sherri. Yes, any of you that have any questions, please feel free to post them in the chat. Sherri, do you have your contact details as well?
You know, isn't that not being modest? I don't, but
I really appreciate you including my contact details.
Hey,
but why don't if you could give me your email address, I'll put it in the chat. So
that'd be great. Sure. Yep. It's cahootsinc.com. CAHOOTSINC.com. That's our website.
All right. And is there an email address that people could reach out to you if they have questions?
Sure. And I'm going to give you all my personal and direct email, but I do ask that you know that I may not be able to get back with you immediately because I do give clients priority, but I would love to answer your questions if you send them. And so my email address is SKERR, that's S Kerr, Sherri Kerr, at cahootsinc.com.
Great. Thank you very much for that.
And please, in the subject line, refer to the name of the webinar or Missio Nexus, so it doesn't accidentally end up in junk or overlooked. So that would help me out greatly if you've got questions.
Great. I've just posted that in the chat for everybody. I've got Sherri's personal email address and just that reminder to put in the subject line the name of the webinar, put Missio Nexus. So let's see, I think we do have a question. Yeah, somebody is just a comment. You've helped me to be more comfortable with the B
word. Thank you.
Yes,
Yeah.
and even how it is essential to our ministry.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Anyone else? Any comments or questions? Sherri, I'm wondering, are there any, somebody was asking earlier about any tips you have for a mission statement. How about for creating a brand guide? How do people go about getting that done? Should they always hire an agency to help them with that? Or are there templates and tools available online that they could use to create one of their own?
That is a really great question. I'm going to escape from this and I'm going to go back to, let me get here. I'm going to go back to the my slide deck here and I'll go back up to that if I can find it quickly. Let's see, where is it? I believe here. Am I there? Yes. So let me just show you all the slides. Where's my collaborative slide? Nope. Sorry, I'm going through this. I hope I don't make anybody motion sick here. So I'm going to show you this kind of overview. I will tell you that anybody can put a brand guide together. You can just open up a Word doc and start. But again, what you need to make sure you're covering and really give the guidelines to. I'm going to go down specifically for you down onto the logo sheet. This is the kind of information you want to have so that when somebody goes, oh, you want to have in whatever device you use to share documents, where it's SharePoint or it's your server, wherever people are able to get that ping of the logo or the JPEG, wherever you keep your, if you will, your brand suite, whether it's, avatars and all the different places, it should be in one place, and that's where your brand guide should be. But the kind of detail you want, for example, is this kind of thing, is where you show what it looks like in 2 colors, what it looks like in black and white. You demonstrate the X height. In other words, you can't get closer to this logo than the height of the lowercase e, which is right there, right? We actually set those parameters up so that you don't have anybody ever crowd the logo. We make sure that you see the PMS, the Pantone colors in here, PMS 2747C in black. That's what our colors are. The icon will appear in PMS 2747C when used in color, most often rendered in CMYK or RGB values. You let them know how to use it and which logo. This is our logo in RGB. Here's our logo in CMYK. If you don't have those versions of your logos, you should create them or have your brand designer, whoever does your design work, create all those versions, because an RGB logo is what you're going to want when you're doing PowerPoint. Okay, because it is it's illuminated, and that's what RGB is used for. CMYK, if you're printing your magazine and that's going on paper and it's going on a press, you're going to be wanting to use CMYK because that's how you're building color. So the different versions are important. Also we talked about having a stacked version of a logo and horizontal. Never fails. You get something, somebody wants to, I'll tell you the perfect example. They want to put it on a promotional item. They want to put the logo and name on a pen, a ballpoint pen. And that's what, a 1/4 inch height. You're going to need to have a horizontal version of your brand mark for sure. You need to have a reversed version. That's essentially a white logo that can be placed over a solid image or on a photo and reversed out. And then, of course, anything you should also formalize, any avatars that you have. I showed you how the Skylark, we did that. And in the case of Deaf Bible, obviously, literally, the words, the sign language for Deaf Bible is the avatar that we use for the organization. The kind of content that's on the side here, I'm going to read this to you, but this is how detailed it should be if you can. And if you've got someone who's formally trained as a designer, a graphic designer who does brand design, they'll be familiar with this kind of stuff too, to be able to help you compose it. But for example, the logo should be produced primarily in its official colors. If necessary, it may be used in black or reverse white, or according to color guidelines on the following page. It's that kind of information that you have to have. The logo must include a maximum margin. I talked to you about that. Actual size of the X will differentiate based on the size of the logo. For the sake of clarity, the logo may be used no smaller than the minimum size shown, 1 inch. You should have a minimum size. Don't let them go smaller than this, because if you do, it won't be read well. And if you're doing a reverse thing, you should place the logo on a solid background, generally not to use it over texture or photos. So give them the guidelines. What are you allowed to do? What are you not allowed to do? So I think I showed you on this page the basics that you should have is at least a logo page and how to use it. If you've got a lot of different colored things, programs, products, service images on a page, all of your colors broke down and in a good color palette matrix. Fonts for sure. I cannot tell you how many people go, I just don't like that. I'm going to use Comic Sans. And you go, oh, please, please don't use Comic Sans. That is not our brand font. Making sure people have them loaded on their computers. They're not going to use something they can't access. If they use the Microsoft suite, making it so that when you open up a Word document in Microsoft, it immediately defaults to your primary body copy font. It's really easy to do that, and it makes it very intentional, and it keeps, Janie and Tom from, like I said, sending out a letter that's being produced, using the Comic Sans fonts, because that's not your brand. Your fonts are expression of it. So having that formalized, same thing with your voice, that everybody does the phone number the same, everybody does PM the same, that you all refer to the deity the same. Is that capital? Is Jesus capitalized? Is it not capitalized? Is the Bible capitalized? Is it not capitalized? So getting all of those formalities straight, once people have the guidelines, they'll use them. And it just really builds your brand. So here's just the basic stuff, but I will tell you, most of our brand guides are up to 20 pages long because every aspect of the organization, you saw those tools of engagement, are addressed in the brand guide. How do we do it in advertising? How do we do it in our public relations information? How do we do it in our publications? Each of those guidelines, because here's the other thing. If you're stewarding communications, and let's just say God calls you somewhere else next year, and after last year, my gracious, so many things changed. But if you leave, someone should have the guidelines to be able to carry on and steward that brand after you. And so I think it's a really important, gracious thing to do as a professional in communications, to make sure that that you leave an organization in a place where they can pick up and they've got the guidelines and somebody else can follow them.
That's great, Sherri. I really appreciate especially this ending part, just the importance of being able to pass this on so that your organization can carry on building its brand equity and doesn't lose any ground. So it's excellent. I do have another question.
Sure.
Jenna has asked, with a mission statement, should you plan for future iterations of the organization or just include where your organization is at presently? And then she goes on to say, for example, we are primarily focused on developing a specific location. So they're looks like they're putting together a building, but it will probably expand into being more of an equipping organization, less focused on a building.
Contrary to popular belief, and we feel strongly about it, your mission statement, if need be, can absolutely change every year. We wouldn't recommend it because you're not going to get a lot of equity and you're going to have to retrain the staff to memorize that sentence. But you know what? Healthy organizations change. God grows ministries. And so we see that all the time. Sometimes you just add a word. Sometimes you just take a word out. So I will tell you that it should be, your mission statement should be a living, breathing thing that is stewarded and watched and considered all the time. I wouldn't change it a lot because it's not going to have stuck yet in anybody's mind. And when you finally get everybody on staff and the missionaries all memorizing it, and then you want to switch it up. And so I will tell you that if you're going to change into something else, you've probably heard of a vision statement. That's what your vision statement should be. Here's what we are today is our mission. This is what our mission is every day when we show up for work. Your vision is, and here's where our vision is going to take us. Here's where we're going to go. And that may be where you're able to go from the building to the educational emphasis.
That's great, Sherri. I have another question for you. It's just lost it. Oh, yes. When you're working with an organization and maybe your board has a lot of say over some aspects of the brand, how can you, as a communications or marketing person, help them to see that your expertise is what they need in order to put together a good mission statement, help establish the brand in an effective way? How would you encourage somebody in that area?
Okay, I'm going to go back to another slide. And I have to tell you, there isn't an organization we work with where the board doesn't have a lot of say. And we say that so respectfully, don't we? Because we know that we need a board. We need to have that opportunity and such. So I'm bringing this back up. Ambleside is a perfect example where you've got gracious over 25 schools. They're all getting close. How do you do it? How do you, the biggest key with the board is, when somebody gets put on the board, that there's this immediate assumption that they're all wise and that they know everything. What we do is board training, because the majority of board members who do not understand branding in its true professional extent is huge. You know what? Board members are just people like us. And if you haven't been in the trenches every day doing this, being, literally being students of this as a practice, because there's science behind it, as you all know, we do board training. And so when you start training a board, and you can do things like when they, I'll tell you the other thing we did with Ambleside is everybody wanted to have a great big picture of the students in the school in their uniforms in front of a desk writing on a piece of paper. So I put up a slide that had 12 photos showing that. And I asked them, which of these 12 photos are depicting Ambleside students? And they went, wow, we're not sure. Well, there was only 2. The rest were different Christian schools that all have the same idea that everybody that's what should be on that big splash photo, the glory shot on the homepage. You have to teach people. Do you see how this didn't differentiate? Where that does not help us communicate better. So it's education. It's education.
Thank you, Sherri. That's great. Is there anything else that you would like to share with this group that you haven't already gone over in your presentation that you just want them to come away with?
I think probably one of the hardest things, because I will just tell you that we are a registered advertising agency, and having done this for 40 years. I mean, we've actually been in the industry that long. One of the things I can really tell you, and I know you probably all experience this too, is oftentimes, especially in ministry, we're called and asked to do something that's outside of our education and our training. And I know how difficult that is. I also know that ministry is synonymous with no budget. But if you've got the opportunity to have a professional designer, for example, if you need a new logo and stuff, actually produce a full brand suite and do those things for you, and you're taught then how to manage it from that point, that's a really big opportunity. But we do completely understand the obstacles that budget. Trying to, especially if you're a mission organization, you've got missionaries everywhere who are kind of on their own agenda. They sort of see themselves as independent contractors, if you will, how difficult that is to try to get and help them understand branding. But by being a brand ambassador, it just means if you can, first and foremost, establish a way that you can train the folks that you serve with what all the aspects of branding are, so that they start getting educated and start going, oh, wait a minute, I didn't know that. So education, again, is really the key. But if you can get at least the basics established by a professional, so you've got all the tools, you've got all the formats, most of the time that is one of the best investments as an organization you can make, and then be launched into being able to maintain it and steward it from there yourselves. Because I know not all of you can afford to have a graphic designer on staff and somebody who knows how to design logos. Not all graphic designers can know how to do branding. So again, just getting those parameters of what do we want to absolutely, in a concrete way, say this is what our brand's going to look like and be. But most of you've got the tools right at your computer to be able to put those guidelines together.
Thank you very much, Sherri. This has been excellent. I know our attendees have enjoyed this, and I'm sure they have as much as I have. I encourage you to consider joining the Communications Director and Staff cohort, which you can find under the program and cohort menus on the Missio Nexus website. This will enable you to connect with other people engaged in marketing and communications. Thank you also to all of you who joined and participated with us. I'm Heather Pupils, along with Mary Kay, our producer.